A good day, ladies and gentlemen. Sanibonani, dumelang, dubalabudi. My name is Professor Chilidzi Marwara. I am Director of the United Nations University, as well as the Undersecretary General of the United Nations, and I'm based in Tokyo, Japan. Previously, I was the Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg, where I positioned the University of Johannesburg as the university that drives the fourth industrial revolution. In summary, the most important technology of the fourth industrial revolution is actually artificial intelligence. And of course, during my career as an AI engineer, who was trained with a PhD from the University of Cambridge, which I completed in the year 2000. And having spent many years as a professor of artificial intelligence, starting at the University of the Witwatersrand, and ultimately as a dean and the vice chancellor of the University of Johannesburg, I think this technology is defining. It is defining because it is changing every aspect of our lives, whether it is the political aspect, whether it is the social aspect, and most importantly, it is changing the economic aspects of our lives. And of course, given all these developments that are happening around us, we who come from South Africa, and particularly coming from the African continent, cannot afford to be left behind. As Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg, in 2018, I introduced a compulsory artificial intelligence course. Everybody who goes to the University of Johannesburg, certainly when I was a Vice Chancellor, was expected to complete a certificate in artificial intelligence so that when they come out, they are literate in the field of artificial intelligence. Of course, this was a literacy course. It was not a course which would allow you to develop algorithms. It was not the course that would allow you to be able to program using Python. But at the least, you were supposed to come out of this course understanding what this technology is all about, what it is doing to all aspects of our lives, and hopefully the people who have completed the course would be able to chart for themselves what this technology means for them, their careers, so that they can fully participate in this technology. Now, what is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence is a technology that makes machines intelligent. They're intelligent because they can be able to do tasks that normally would require human brain to be able to process. I have often talked about how I came to artificial intelligence. I came to artificial intelligence almost by accident. But the first person to actually stimulate my interest in artificial intelligence, even though it was not direct, was actually my grandmother. My grandmother was an organic engineer. She used to make all sorts of things and sell them. For example, she would make mats and she would sell them. Another thing that she would make was she would grow tobacco, and then she will ground it into snuff and sell that. She also used to brew alcohol, mtomboti in Venda, and also she used to brew that illegal alcohol called tototo, which is really distilled alcohol. It was illegal at the time because Africans were not allowed to brew beer that is, or alcohol that is colorless. One thing that she would do that stimulated my interest in artificial intelligence is that she used to make clay pots. And I would actually accompany her to the river so that she can choose the appropriate clay so that she can make her pots. Of course, that process is called material selection. Just a few weeks ago, I have issued a policy brief on how to select materials. For whatever you want to do with materials, you might be selecting materials so that you can make a car, or you might want to select materials so that you can actually make a computer or a cell phone, whatever the reason is. The process of sitting down and looking at materials and selecting the appropriate materials is an important one. And of course, in our case as the United Nations, we believe that when you select the materials, you should select them so that they conform to the principles of sustainable development, so that they can conform to the principles of reducing the carbon footprint. My grandmother used to obviously select the clay, and I have often wondered whether in a selection of the clay, the idea of sustainability was part of the deal. But nonetheless, she selected the material very well. At engineering schools, and I will single out Mr. Seaborn and Ashby from the University of Cambridge for developing a software that would select materials. And today, such softwares are empowered with artificial intelligence. And of course, my grandmother would bring back the clay and make it into a pot. A pot is a complicated structure. It is complicated because it is hollow. If the walls of the pot are too thick, then you require much more energy to actually cook. If it is too thin, it's going to break too easily. And that process of identifying the absolute optimal thickness of the walls of the pots involves something called optimization. And optimization is actually at the core of artificial intelligence. In fact, there are many optimization algorithms that are AI-based, and I will single out simulated annealing, for example. My grandmother was able to know the appropriate thickness of her pots, not necessarily with the benefit of artificial intelligence, but she had all the wisdom to be able to do that. And after that, my grandmother will put those pots into the sun so that they can be dried. Of course, after they are dried, they are not strong enough. The issue of material integrity that we teach in engineering, testing for strength, testing for tensile tensions, compression tensions, are now standard tools that are used in AI, in engineering. And of course, my grandmother did not know any of those techniques, but she organically knew what to do. And thereafter, she will put her pot into the fire. She will heat it so hard, so hot, that her eyes would be red because of the reflection of the heat, the heating of the pots in her eyes. And after that, she will allow the pots to cool down, and she will knock each pot and listen to the sound. If the sound is long, it's a good pot. If the sound is short, it's a bad pot. Of course, when we go to engineering class, if the sound is long, then it is a lightly damped structure. If the sound is short, it means there might be some fluid that is trapped on the walls of the pot, and therefore it's a bad pot. And of course, as time went on, my grandmother was throwing away good pots because her hearing was actually deteriorating. And of course, that process is what I did my PhD at Cambridge on. How do you knock a structure, whether it is the engine of the car, and you listen to the sound, and you take that sound into an artificial intelligence algorithm, and the algorithm will tell you whether the engine of a car is good or not. And this process has now been extended to monitoring patients in hospitals, monitoring the structures of aeroplanes, the monitoring bridges so that they cannot collapse. And of course, this process is industrialized because instead of people listening to the sound of structures as my grandmother would often do, we would have measuring devices such as accelerometers, and we would be able to invoke artificial intelligence to be able to do that. This is really what artificial intelligence is all about. Now, it is changing absolutely everything around us. It's changing the world of work because you can be able to use it to automate industries. And that automation process actually is putting people out of their jobs. What is to be done? What is to be done so that artificial intelligence benefits are maximized and its risks, such as the risk of job losses, are actually minimized? This is what we term the governance of artificial intelligence. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, has appointed a committee called the High-Level Advisory Board on Artificial Intelligence that is going to come up with the governance of this artificial intelligence. When we talk about governance, we have to govern things that we are supposed to use to deploy artificial intelligence. And as we build the skills of artificial intelligence, we need to know what are those skills. Artificial intelligence is really about four things. First is about data. And my grandmother used to get that data by knocking the pots and listening to the sound. The second aspect is algorithms. Algorithms are computer programs that are designed to be able to instruct a computer to think intelligently. And there are many algorithms, multi-layer perceptron, machine learning, algorithms, and so on and so forth. We need to educate people to understand that, as much as we need to educate people to understand data. And the third aspect is about computing. Because you can have the algorithm if you don't have access to computing. And when you are talking about large language models like ChatGPT, you are talking about very expensive computing. And of course, quite a few years ago, I had a PhD student, Rendani Mbuba, who is now a professor at the University of London. And he was deploying artificial intelligence, and it required computational power, computing. And for us to be able to do that, we had to go to Amazon Web Services to buy computing power. Very expensive. Later on, we realized that the CSIR actually has high-performance computing capabilities that we can be able to use to build offerings that we can actually be able to sell to the markets. And the last aspect of artificial intelligence is really about applications. How do we apply it to African languages so that we can have our own African versions of ChatGPT or our own versions of Siri? How do we apply this technology in medical health so that the patients can get the benefit of an algorithm that does not get tired, as opposed to a human doctor whose effectiveness is influenced by their mood, how long they have slept, and they often get tired. And their accuracy, in many ways now, is becoming less than the accuracy of artificial intelligence. Now, going back to the issue of governance, when we govern artificial intelligence, what we really mean is that we are going to govern data, and the governing of data means data collection, data analysis, data storage, and ultimately data sharing, cross-border data sharing, sharing data amongst business partners, and so on and so forth. The second aspect is governing algorithms. We know too well that these AI algorithms actually discriminate against people of African descent, and we need to design them so that they observe the principles of human rights. We need to ensure that these algorithms are designed well, they are trained well, they are tested well, so that their benefits are maximized and their risks are minimized. And the third aspect of governing is really about governing computing. And when we talk about computing, we get very, very quickly into semiconductors. There were global wars over who has access to graphical processing units, semiconductors that are powering technologies such as ChatGPT and so on and so forth. And Africa should not be left behind. And Africa is being left behind. As the youth of the African continent, you have the responsibility to ensure that the African continent is absolutely not left behind. And the only way you can be able to do that is by studying, and studying very, very hard. And of course, when we come to the governance of computing, we have to worry about issues of cloud computing versus edge computing. In Africa, the clouds are not in the African continent. They are in Silicon Valley, which basically means the response time for us is slower than the response times of people who are in the global north, giving the people in the global north and a distinct advantage, a competitive advantage that they can use economically to undermine our progress. So, and then lastly is the issue of governing applications. How do we regulate AI in health, in transportation, in our banking systems, and so on and so forth? Now, how do we do that? I think firstly, we need to establish the values of AI. What are these values? I think AI must actually become transparent. It must be open. We need to know what it is doing so that when it is used to determine whether a customer in a bank gets a loan or not, there is an explanation when they don't get a loan, for example. We call that transparency. It needs to be safe. It needs to be secure. Especially when it is using personal data. People's personal data must actually be secured. And of course, this AI system must actually maximize the benefits and minimize the bad. Those are the values of AI. Secondly, we need to change human behavior towards AI. Who are the humans as far as AI is concerned? These are the users. These are the business people, women and men who are developing this technology. These are government agencies that are adopting this technology. And how do we change the behavior of those people? Through education. So that example that I gave at the beginning of this talk of making AI literacy compulsory, as we did at the University of Johannesburg, is absolutely necessary and must be promoted. The second aspect is actually the mechanism of incentives and disincentives. How do we incentivize small and medium enterprises to apply this technology to improve their productivity? How do we disincentivize those sinister people who are going to use this technology to generate fake news, to confuse people, to undermine the security of people, personal information violation using AI. And then the third aspect is to develop policies and regulations. And these policies and regulations can happen at the international level, as the high-level advisory board of the Secretary General of the UN is trying, is doing. It can happen at the continental level, as the African Union is doing. It can happen at the national level, as the Fourth Industrial Revolution Commission, which I deputized President Ramaphosa, did. And the task team that was appointed by the Ministry of Communications and Digital Technologies with Professor Vukosi Maribate as chair is doing. And then is standards and laws. These necessarily mean the people that we send to our parliaments must be literate. This means the South African Bureau of Standards must actually elevate itself to understand these technologies so that they can create standards for AI goods, as they have done for goods that are imported. Currently, that expertise does not exist. And it's a challenge to the youth who are listening to this to go out there and ensure that you can create companies that will assist organizations such as the South African Bureau of Standards to be able to do that. And ultimately, it's about building institutions to regulate this technology. These institutions can be in the society in general. They can be part of the government regulatory framework. They can be industry specific. The health sector might have its own regulatory processes. And ultimately, in conclusion, whether we are going to succeed in this technology or not will depend on you. It will depend on what you do. If I were to quote our ancestor, Kwame Nkrumah, like never before, we need thinkers of great thoughts. Like never before, we need doers of great deeds. Study, learn, and advance the interests of the African people. Ndiyaribuwa, Nyabonga, Enkosi.